All right. Well, welcome everyone to our 10 a.m. session for this June 2023 Kriya Yoga Online Solstice Retreat. During our talk today, we're going to be considering the yogic way to consistently experience Samadhi. I thought this would be important to talk about because many people treat the idea of experiencing Samadhi as though it's something really far away or something that is very difficult for a person to experience, or that it's almost sometimes even unbelievable that it could be experienced. And that's not really the case. And that is why we have the system of yoga. And specifically, that's why Patanjali wrote the Yoga Sutras, because within that text, you'll find information that will tell you how to consistently experience Samadhi. The 8 limbs of yoga contribute to this. The whole purpose of the 8 limbs of yoga, from preparation, which is yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, and so on. This preparation is what gives you the ability to eventually direct your awareness within and to experience that aspect of yourself which is eternal, which lasts forever, which is happy. Now, later on in some of the other slides, I've got a nice little visual, I think, which will help you understand how that works, but just hold on to that idea. But in order to recognize this, in order to experience, we have to prepare ourselves. And the way we prepare ourselves is, number one, by practicing the yamas and the niyamas, which are what? This is the vow that a yogi takes essentially so that they stop creating binding karma for themselves. And binding karma is that kind of karma which makes us feel like a small, limited being which is going to suffer all the time and die and have all these difficulties and be tossed around by the experiences of life. When we live in relationship to the yamas and niyamas, we tend to rise above those activities, again, which bind us to this wheel of samsara, this wheel of sorrow. Once we are able to undertake this idea of the yamas and the niyamas and live from them, and in the Yoga Sutras, it specifically says these are applicable no matter what circumstance you're in, no matter what situation is going on, no matter who you are, these are always applicable, which means that when it comes down to how do I behave in a given situation, you don't have to worry about it. You just look at the yamas and niyamas, and if there's an option to behave like one of the yamas and niyamas, you do that. And this answers a lot of questions in life because people wonder, well, what am I supposed to do with my life? How am I supposed to live? We look at the yamas and niyamas. This is the foundation. This is why they're considered stages 1 and 2. The next stage within this outer practice of preparation is asana. Now, asana has taken on a different kind of meaning in the last few decades than what Patanjali was probably aiming for. These days, when we think of asana, we think of going to an hour-long or an hour-and-a-half yoga class where we're moving through postures and we're doing certain activities with our body. But asana is a way of releasing attachment to the body. And so that's why it's described, asana is described as any posture, essentially any posture, which allows you to sit up straight, be strong, and then release your awareness within. Now, hatha yoga classes and hatha yoga routines can be very helpful. I was thinking about this morning, actually, because as you're going through hatha yoga routines, there might be situations where you are uncomfortable, where you have to stretch, where there's a little bit of burn, or where you have to hold a posture for a while. And when you go through that process, not necessarily for the sake of making yourself look great, but to give you an experience of your body, then you recognize, I can hold this pose. And it might be uncomfortable, but so what? You learn to let go of your attachment to the body. You learn to sit in such a way that you don't have to move. And so you don't fidget, or you're able to let go of attachment to the things that make you fidget. And this is the real cultivation of the idea of asana. And when you get later into the Yoga Sutras, it really confirms this, that when you are experiencing asana, you are free. You are free of difficulties with the body. So anything that you do, which gives you the ability to use your body in a healthy way, but also trains you to recognize that your body will bring information to you, such as pleasant experiences or unpleasant experiences, but that's no big deal. You can still let go of attachment to those, and you still exist within that. You are, in a sense, the Swami, and Swami means master. And this term is used in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, in that the elements and the things that we see and that we sense, that's like the domain of the Swamin, the master. So asana is about training yourself to release your attachment to your body. And one of the best ways to do that, if you can, is to make the body strong, make the body healthy. So this is asana. And then after we're able to sit still, and many of us, we don't think that we're practicing yoga when we're doing this, but if you can just sit still for 15 minutes, that's working on the stage of asana. You might still be going out of your mind with your thoughts and everything, but it starts by learning to simply sit still. And once you can sit still, we move into the practice of pranayama. And pranayama is important because what pranayama does is whereas asana brings you into the awareness of the physical, what asana does, after you go through the asana practice, pranayama then brings you into the experience of the energy of the body. And as we'll see, the process of yoga and the process of experiencing samadhi is moving from the elements, the physical aspect, to the energetic, to subtler than the energetic, and so on. So when we're doing pranayama, what we're doing is we are engaging a technique which balances the energy field within the body, but it also balances the mind. Because you've heard it said that if you're able to control the breath or regulate the breath, then the mind regulates itself too. And so essentially what pranayama is, it's like the asana for the energy of the body, or asana for the mind. So we're moving from the physical to the energetic aspect through pranayama. And these are all the outer aspects of yoga, but it is the preparation for the deeper part of the practice. And this is why we have to spend a lot of time on this, because if you have not actually learned to sit still, how can you expect to be able to flow your awareness within? If you're still so distracted by your body, how can you develop the sensitivity to know what you feel like energetically inside, or what you feel like in your mind, or what thoughts there are? And then when you start to get balance within the emotional area, the energetic area, the mental area, well, then you have the capacity to go beyond that, even into a superconscious state. And so we have to remember that a superconscious state, it's not non-existent. It exists everywhere. It's here right now. You can go into it at any time, but you have to have the sensitivity to be able to access it. You know, some people do Qigong. Some people do some of these energy exercises and they can't feel a thing. Well, they're still going through the process and they're still getting the benefit from it. But when you can focus more on the feeling, the energy of it, that's when you get the actual benefit from it. That's why we have different kinds of medicine. Some people need to go get their back cracked by a chiropractor, or they need some hardcore drugs, or they need something very physical, because their subtlety of awareness is focused more on physical things. This is why we can't necessarily be super critical of people who don't spend more time with alternative medicine. They might not have the subtlety to respond to it. Some people can take a Bach flower essence and it really impacts their life because they have the subtlety to feel that. Other people, again, need to have a grosser experience because that is where their subtlety is. Just like in Autobiography of a Yogi, when you hear about Lahiri Mahasaya saying, just go put these 3 drops of oil in someone's mouth and then they'll be fine. Well, that won't work for someone who doesn't have a sensitivity to what Lahiri Mahasaya is able to offer. But people who are able to have a sensitivity to a subtler state of consciousness, then they tend to benefit by this. I was having a discussion with my stepdaughter, and we were talking about this. I was saying there are different kinds of medicine. There's Kali Yuga medicine, which is what? Go get cut, go get drugs, go get the physical things. And many of us need that from time to time because our bodies will respond to that. But there's also Dwapara Yuga medicine, and that's more of an energetic type of work. And very few of us are really that sensitive to it. We're working at it. That's why it's becoming more and more in our awareness. But Mr. Davis didn't really advise getting too much involved in all of that, mainly because the subtle knowledge of it really hasn't been as developed as it needs to be for it to be as effective as it could be. Anyway, that's kind of off point here. But what we're aiming to do is to increase our sensitivity. Now, this brings us to an important point. What happens when you become more sensitive? When you become more sensitive and you're not actually strong enough to be, I guess, able to handle it, when you become more sensitive, you can not only are you more sensitive to the good things, but you're also more sensitive to the irritating things. And this is why when we need to focus on the yamas and niyamas, because this gives us like a strength of character, a strength of energy, such that as we become more sensitive, we are not going to become overwhelmed by subtler difficulties. Why is it that when people start to get on a yogic path and they start to meditate, they feel a little more disturbed, a little more like they become more anxious, or their depression becomes a little more activated? Is it because, as the Christian fundamentalists would say, that you're unleashing demons or you're tapping into the demonic realm? No, that's not why it's happening. It's because as you become more subtle, all those issues that you haven't looked at, that you haven't dealt with, that you're not at peace with inside, that you've spent so much energy trying to like ignore or not work through, as you become more subtle, you can't ignore them anymore. And again, this is one of the prime reasons why I say it's very important, if you're going to do this in a very deep way, to have a counselor. Or to have someone that you can actually work this stuff through with. Self-help books are great, but they're only going to take you so far, because we're really good at not looking at our blind spots. But this is part of the process. And this is what makes it so hard. And sometimes what makes it so scary for people, because as they become more aware, well, then they become more aware, which means that if there's a quality within them that they have repressed or not looked at, or have done their best to just push down as hard as they could, in order to get to that deeper level of themselves, they're going to have to go through that. And in an ideal world, if we would have been raised in a culture with a family that was loving and caring and supportive, then when we started to practice yoga, and we would already have had the yamas and niyamas instilled in us as a natural cultural theme, then when we started to practice asana and we got a little irritated, it wouldn't bother us too much, because we knew we had the resilience to handle it. When we started to get into pranayama, and we started doing more breath work, and some things came up that were a little little iffy for us mentally or emotionally, we would have already been surrounded by and had the capacity to know that we're resilient enough to say, you know what, yeah, I've got a little bit of depression here, or I've got some anxiety, but no big deal. I'm willing to kind of breathe through it. And many people do have that, and that's wonderful, but a lot of us don't. And so we have to be aware of that, because in order to get to these deeper levels, we will have to go through we will have to go through whatever might be obstructing us mentally and emotionally. Because if there wasn't a mental emotional obstruction there, you wouldn't have to do any of this. You would already be in a state of peace, right? So when we're looking at this preparatory level, we have to address it globally, holistically, from how we live, how we choose to live, what our principles are, what our morals are. We have to make sure our body is strong and healthy, and we have a healthy relationship with the body to be able to handle stress from time to time and to make ourselves stronger. We also have to have a healthy relationship with our mind and our emotions and find a way to have that satisfied. Again, it's important for you to remember that, and how that's going to be true for you, I don't know. You have to explore that and be willing to explore that. And that's part of the Kriya Yoga process. That's part of the yoga process. That's what is necessary to be able to access these deeper states of consciousness. And again, we'll move on from this in just a second. But how do you expect to flow into a superconscious state or a samadhi state when you've got all your energy locked up in pushing away this anxiety that you just don't want to deal with? Or how do you expect to be able to feel safe enough to flow into these deeper states when deep down inside you have a lot of rage about something? I don't know what that is. Maybe you do, maybe you don't have it. But if it's there, it's going to block you from being able to go into these deeper states of consciousness. And if you're with a more traditional type person and you start to have reactions, they're going to say, oh, it's Kundalini syndrome or something like that. And when really it's not. It's just there hasn't been necessarily appropriate preparation before going into this. So remember, wherever you are, that is Kriya Yoga practice. That is yoga practice. That is evolving your consciousness, so long as you are actually really doing what it takes to move into these later stages. You can't jump ahead. So wherever you are, that's perfectly fine. And everyone has to go through this. It's like preparing to climb a mountain. Everyone has to do the same kind of preparation to do it well. This is your mountain. I'm not going to spend a whole lot more time on these outer practices because they're things that we've talked about a lot. And there's other resources that you can use and you can find for yourself to help develop these. But what comes next on this yogic way to consistently experience samadhi? Dharana. Dharana is the practice of focusing your consciousness. And meditation really is the combination of all three of these, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. But you have to be able to focus your consciousness first. This is dharana. This is directing your consciousness. This morning when we did the chanting through the chakras, I talked a lot. I remember when I used to lead meditations, my late wife, Melissa, would tell me I needed to shut up. She said, I talk too much. She said, I need to let people have their own experience. And I think that's partially true. But I also think that from my experience and studying the Yoga Sutras more, that even when I was talking a lot and I was directing you back to the chakra and back to a type of experience within the chakra, that is a way of concentrating. That is a way of focusing. And if you were focused on what I was saying, even though I was talking a lot, you weren't focused on 20,000 other things. So that was a practice of learning to direct your consciousness inward on one thing. All right, so we have to learn to direct our consciousness. That takes practice and time, because once we learn to direct our consciousness, then we experience dhyana. And dhyana is a building of momentum, which removes the old grooves from our chitta, from our consciousness. What I have found is by chanting through the chakras on my own, and by constantly reminding myself about the experience, like what I verbalized to you, now when I sit to meditate, I have done it so often that as soon as I bring my awareness to the root chakra and the second chakra and the third chakra, there's a momentum there which already knows, oh, now we're going to focus here and we're just going to be aware of these physical sensations, these subtle sensations, these elemental sensations. A groove has been built up because of my consistent practice such that when I focus there, now I easily am able to let go of all the other things which distracted me previously. So when we think of dhyana, we have to remember that it results from the repeated focus, dharana, the direction of our consciousness, and it builds up a momentum. In a way, I have always seen it kind of like when you're on a skateboard, and at first you're just standing on the skateboard, nothing's happening. Well, the moment you kick off the ground, the skateboard moves forward. Now, if you only kick once, it's going to stop after a few feet. All right. And then you have to kick off again. And you keep kicking until eventually the skateboard just goes. And then every now and then you might have to kick just to keep it going, but it's very minimal. And the same thing happens in our meditation. Once we start focusing on something, we might be able to hold it there for 30 seconds, 10 seconds, or a minute, and then we lose it. Well, that's pushing, that's focusing, and then we might have to kick off again, which means we have to redirect our awareness again until eventually we get going so well that we experience dhyana, which means there's a momentum. And then every now and then we still might have to push off to recenter ourselves, but that's not a problem. That's just part of the process. And then we experience dhyana. And when we're experiencing a state of dhyana in meditation, that's when whatever you're focusing on stays in your awareness. And if you have the idea that you're just going to sit down and meditate upon Divine Mother and wonder why you don't have a profound experience of Divine Mother, it's because you probably just kicked off once and then wondered why the momentum didn't continue. And so what you have to do is, we'll just use the example of meditating on Divine Mother again, is when you sit down to meditate, you think about everything that you imagine Divine Mother is. The moment you start thinking about everything you imagine Divine Mother is, you've already brought your consciousness to a point. You're still thinking, but that's okay. This is part of the process, as we'll see as we go along. And then you think about it so much that then you start to wonder, what would it feel like if I was actually in the presence of what I consider Divine Mother to be? So then you move from the thinking to engaging the emotional state. And what happens is the more you engage this repeatedly, and at first it does take effort and you wonder why you're even doing it. But once you catch the momentum, then you recognize that you stop meditating and your mind is still thinking about it. You're still feeling it. And then that's when you're experiencing a state of dhyana. The momentum is carrying itself forward. But as it says in the Yoga Sutras, you have to do this over a long period of time. So we have to be very realistic about our approach. Now, once we have built up this momentum, then we are able to simply abide in the experience. And that's when Samadhi develops. What is Samadhi? That's when you experience reality directly. There's a revelation of that which you're contemplating. So if you're contemplating Divine Mother and you've thought about her a lot, you've chanted, that's why the chants often have like these long lists of what is Divine Mother like qualities. It's getting your mind in that kind of pattern of focusing on the qualities. And then you start to have the emotional experience, the energetic experience. And if you can sustain that, which you need to, eventually what happens is the momentum becomes so strong that you don't have to think about it anymore. You don't have to try to feel it anymore. You are just able to exist, abide in that state of whatever you're contemplating. And then you have a direct experience of it. This is how you go through the stages to experience Samadhi. But again, we have to have the preparation here, the outer practice, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama. So how do you prepare for this inward journey? So preparation for the journey inward. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda asks this Swami, do you think, revered Swami, that I could ever fight tigers? And this was a Swami who fought Bengal tigers before he became the Soham Swami. And the Swami replied, yes, but there are many kinds of tigers. Now, I love this quote because I love this story actually, because it really brings home what the process is. And over here on the left, this is actually a picture of that Swami, the Soham Swami, the Tiger Swami, which I'd never seen before until I discovered it recently. And so when you are beginning your yogic path, you have to remember that there are going to be some tigers that you have to fight. And how do you know what tigers you have to fight in order to be able to really go into dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, a samadhi state? Well, you look and you start with the yamas and you ask yourself, am I harmless? Meaning, do I not have an animosity within me? You know, there are people in my life and situations that I don't like, that I won't tolerate, but I don't have an animosity towards those people. I don't really wish them ill, and I don't really want to see anyone hurt or hurting. So it doesn't mean that you become a pushover, but you have to ask yourself, where are the situations in my life that I have a sense of animosity towards? And then you figure out, how can I make peace with that? And you have to do whatever it takes to make peace with that. Are you able to be truthful? Are you able to feel like you don't have to take from other people? Celibacy, that doesn't necessarily mean sexual celibacy. That just means being true. You know, are you true to your word? Do you not break your word? You know, if you're in a relationship, celibacy means being honorable towards your partner. You've told your partner, I'm in a relationship with you, we're working together, I'm not going to go mess around with anybody else. That's a type of celibacy that keeps you focused. Non-hoarding, are you not trying to accumulate more things to make yourself feel better? And that non-hoarding doesn't just go to physical things. Back in the day, hoarding was gathering all your stuff together. Well, now hoarding is, how many friends do I have on social media? Did people like my posts? Do people see what I'm doing? You're trying to hoard energy to make yourself feel better. So you have to look at these things and ask yourself, are any of these practices of the yamas and niyamas tigers that I need to address? With the niyamas, cleanliness, contentment, discipline, study, and surrender. Cleanliness, just living a natural life, a healthful life, a pure life. Contentment, well, that's santosha. Learning to be content in the circumstances that you're in. Not to be, what's the word? It doesn't mean to give up, because you can still achieve things. And when you haven't succeeded, you can still be content in the trying. So it's like when you're trying to improve a situation or make something better, you're doing it just because you have a natural inspiration to do it. You know, if you need a new home, it doesn't mean that you're discontent with the home that you're in. Maybe it just doesn't serve you anymore. So you decide, well, I need to work towards a new home. So you do, but you maintain a state of contentment. Discipline. I was recently watching, we were both recently watching, Jasmine and I, a documentary on Arnold Schwarzenegger on Netflix. I thought it'd be interesting. And whether you agree with his politics or not, he reminded me a lot of Roy, because Roy, he didn't care whether you liked something or not. He thought if you were supposed to do it, you should do it. If you knew it was good for you, if you knew it was worthwhile, if you knew it was supportive of your life, then that is what you did. And I forget exactly how he put it, but he said, you know, I was driven. It didn't matter whether I felt happy or sad that day. He's like, my father always told me just to be useful. Get up and do what you need to do. And this is important when it comes to discipline, because when you wake up in the morning and you meditate anyway, or you practice your yoga or qigong, or you do your work, whether you feel like it or not, what you eventually learn is, oh, some days I'm going to feel good and some days I'm not. And that's just sort of what happens. So I'm not going to let my direction in life be thrown off by these feelings. Now, this is not to say that if you need to rest, you shouldn't rest. Absolutely, you should do things that you need to do. Rest is important. But many of us become so distracted by the fact that just because we don't feel perfect one day, that means we shouldn't just get up and do what we know we need to do. So discipline really in this situation that I'm trying to discuss here is remain focused and acknowledging some days the weather is going to be rainy, some days it's going to be sunny, but you still get up and you do what you need to do. And then you learn that the weather doesn't matter a whole lot. Study. We're doing this now. Studying the Yoga Sutras, studying with your teacher, and surrender. This comes a little later, but really surrender occurs when you recognize that you're a part of something, a greater whole, and you feel that sense of connection to it. So that's something that you have to learn to access and develop through your meditation process. But these are examples of the lions that you have to fight, or that you have to fight and that you have to tame. And this was really an important part of the story from the Tiger Swami in Autobiography of a Yogi, because as you remember, he was an individual who actually fought tigers. And a yogi came to him one day and said, "You better not fight this last tiger because it's going to be bad." And anyway, the story goes that he ended up defeating the tiger, but developed a really bad illness from that. And that's when he discovered the yogic path. And he started to direct his life towards taming his inner tigers rather than the outer tigers. Now, we also have asana, the ability to transcend body awareness, and then pranayama, harmony within the field of energy. So those are things that you do by practicing hatha yoga regularly, by practicing pranayama regularly. Once you make this an integral part of your path, and you've addressed the issues that get in your way, not ignoring them, addressing them, working through them, developing resilience, then you're going to be in a much, much better place to actually engage in the higher practices of yoga. And then you will be able to say, oh, now I know what Yogananda was talking about, what Sri Yukteswar was talking about, what Roy Davis was talking about, or Ramana Maharshi, when they say, this is what a superconscious state is like. Many of us don't reach that state because we've tried to jump too high too quick, rather than building our ladder up so that we can actually make it to the top of the tree where that apple is that we want. This is the process. This is part of the preparation for the journey inward. All right. Now, once we're going to assume, and many of you probably already have done a lot of this work already, so it might be some review for you, but we're going to assume that we've made it to the stage where you're ready to take that dive from the outer practices to the inner practices. And there are these definitions of stages in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. In the first one, in chapter 1, verse 42, these are very loose translations. So those of you who are Sanskrit scholars, bear with me. But there, cognitive blending, which is with thought, is with words, meanings, knowledge, and conceptualization. Cognitive blending, in a way, is a term that relates to samadhi, absorbing your awareness, your attention so fully that you're not aware of anything else. And so we'll say phase 1 is the savitarka stage, which means with thoughts, words, and descriptions. This is often considered to be a lower samadhi, but it doesn't matter. It's still samadhi, and even a lower samadhi is going to have a very positive impact on smoothing out those grooves within your consciousness, within your chitta. So how do you do that? Whatever technique or practice you are doing, do whatever it takes to keep your awareness on it. So for example, let's say using the meditation we did earlier today, if we're focusing on the chakras, well, you start by feeling the chakra in question. And I'm going to have us focus on the heart chakra right now, just to make it easy. So what do you have to do to start having a lower samadhi, a savitarka phase on this chakra? And even just meditate on one chakra at a time. You can go through all of them, but even if you just focus on one, for example, when you focus on the heart chakra within the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, it says that by simply doing this, by practicing attention and awareness on this heart chakra, one acquires knowledge of consciousness, the field of consciousness. So how do we start with Savitarka? We start by feeling the physical area of the body. So you do this. Start right now to just feel the location of the fourth chakra. When I do it right now, I can feel my t-shirt against my skin. I can feel some muscles that are a little sore from where I worked out yesterday. I can feel a looseness in my back because in between the meditation and this session, we went outside and did some Qigong, and I can feel how my back loosened up when I was doing certain Qigong movements. I feel the warmth within my chest. I feel my heartbeat. I feel the rise and fall of my chest as my lungs expand and contract. And if I was doing this on my own, I would just say that. I would say, I feel the clothes on my chest. I would say that to myself. I would say, I feel the sensation in my muscles. I feel the looseness and strength in my back. I feel the rise and fall. And I might cycle through that a few times where I would come back to my clothes, or I would come back to the temperature. And I'm saying this. So I'm using words, and I'm using thought, and I'm using my feeling response, and I'm talking about it. Because if I'm talking about what my heart feels like, that is savitarka. That is a lower form of samadhi because you are absorbed in it, and you are less likely to be thinking about the mug on the shelf or what the rain is doing outside. So this is phase one of moving from the outer to the inner. The next phase is nirvitarka. Now, sa, from what I understand, means with. Nir, just like nirvana. Nir means without. So upon the purification of memory, cognitive blending is beyond thought. When chitta is empty of its own form, it shines forth as the object alone. Now, this is an interesting one. I find this really beautiful because one of the things that gets in the way of our experience, as described from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, can be memory. That can be an obstruction. And why is it that you are distracted by all these different things? Because you have memories of all this that your mind keeps going back to. And as you start to withdraw your awareness, say, into the heart center with words, you are releasing the energy of the memories, the other memories that can get in the way, the other distractions. And the more and more you focus on it, eventually you are just in a feeling state. It's like there's a cognitive blending, and you go beyond the thinking. And so if I was doing that, again, I would say, I feel my shirt, I feel the temperature, I feel the muscles, and so on. Well, I do it so long that eventually I don't have to talk about it in my head anymore. Then it's as if I let the words go, I let the thoughts go, and then my awareness is just cycling through the feeling of the sensation of the clothing against my heart area. It's as though then I just naturally move into the feeling. I don't have to say, feel the muscles. I just feel the muscles. I don't have to say, feel the rise and fall of the breath. It just moves into that, and I'm aware of it without the commentary saying, focus on it. Now, this is going in a pattern. So you might spend a long time with Savitarka where you're talking about it a lot, but you will find eventually that if you can just back off a moment after doing it for, say, 5 minutes or so, you realize that your awareness stays there naturally. It's as though you become aware of what you've just been focusing on without having to talk about it to yourself. And that's a nirvitarka stage. And what I like to do is state when I go into that stage. So if I'm focusing on the heart, I'm talking about it in my mind, describing everything that I feel. Once I feel certain that I've got a good amount of momentum going in that direction, then I say to myself, Nirvitarka. And as soon as I say that, I give myself permission to let go of the words and then to just have the experience that I was just talking about. And it may be that you can only do that for a few moments afterwards. But every time you try, you go a little bit longer. And it might be you have to go back to the Savitarka stage and talk some more about it. That's just redirecting your awareness back to it until it eventually continues onward. This is the inner work that a yogi has to do in order to move into a Samadhi state. And this is from Sutra 143. Oops, too far, but they're all there now. The Savichara stage from 144. In this way, reflection on the subtle and the experience beyond reflection gives cognitive blending with the subtle. So now what we're doing, savichara. Sa is with. It's going to be, again, with the words, with the thoughts, with our imagination, which means now that you've focused on the physical, the clothing, the muscles, the bones, the breath rising and falling, the next stage is to simply feel the energy of it. Which means I might say something like, I'm feeling the heart, and I feel the energy of the breath, as though it's not necessarily the mechanical movement of the chest, but it's as though I feel the need to breathe. And that is an energy that empowers the chest to expand. Or I focus on, I say to myself, I feel that almost electromagnetic, like static electricity feeling in the area. And this might start to take some imagination, but you're trying to relax into a deeper energetic experience of the heart area. And this is why it's vichara, which is subtle. So you're talking to yourself about it again, talking about the subtle energy that you could feel, or what it would feel like if you could feel a subtle field of energy around and within the heart, as if the nerves within the heart, because they are electrical, are creating an electric field that you can sense. And it might be so faint, but you tell yourself it's a faint field. You're talking to yourself about it. And you talk to yourself about it enough that eventually you move on to the nirvichara stage. This is when the subtlety of the objects extends to the unmanifest state of primary matter. That's when you are so absorbed in the subtle that there's no need to think about it, no need to talk about it. Your awareness is just feeling this field. It's like if you've ever been out in the sun and you've just decided to sit there and just feel the energy of the sun radiating through your body. You're not doing anything. You don't have to talk about how the sun feels. You're just letting the experience run through you. And it's a subtle, a deeper feeling than the physical. And if we're able to go through these stages from savitarka to nirvitarka to savichara to nirvichara, incrementally, step by step, in a methodical fashion, this is developing an inner discipline that will, in time, and in less time than you think, assuming you've taken care of the preparatory stages, will start to give you a super conscious and pure conscious experience. You will be able to repeat it again and again, so much so that you say, I want to go outside and I want to drive down the road to the park and go for a walk. You know you can do it. You walk outside, you drive down the road. Even if it's raining, even if it's hailing, you know you can do it. Well, the more you rehearse this, the more you practice this, now you know when you sit down to meditate, you're just going to be able to do it. But you have to be able to recognize these 4 different stages and spend time consciously developing each of them. Consciously developing each of them. And why do we do this? Well, Yogananda said, to surmount Maya was the task assigned to the human race by the millennial prophets. Those who cling to the cosmic illusion must accept its essential law of polarity. flow and ebb, rise and fall, day and night, pleasure and pain, good and evil, birth and death. So what we're doing by moving from the physical to the subtle, and even beyond the subtle, is we are surmounting, rising above the illusion of Maya. Because what most of us do, what most people do, not most of us, because we're all here, which means we're probably not all doing this, but what most people do is they think the physical is all there is. And that is why they suffer again and again and again, because what is the physical but constant flux? Ebb, flow, rise, fall, day, night. That is what it is like to have a physical experience. But the physical is not permanent. And what we're doing with our spiritual practice is to withdraw, or really unveil, I think unveil is a better word, unveil that which is more permanent. So for example, you've got a physical form, everyone is aware of that. Well, when you're not aware of your physical form, say when your eyes are closed and you're just thinking, well, then you're aware of thought, but you're not aware of the physical. So it's possible to have thought exist when the physical does not. When you are able to withdraw from thinking, then you know that even thinking has a coming and a going. But there is another phase behind that which still exists even when the physical doesn't, even when the mental doesn't. And so what you see that we're doing here is we're withdrawing back to a more and more permanent experience of what we truly are. And that is why the sages and the saints experience freedom, because they know that they're not defined by the stuff that changes all the time. So we've got preparation. We learn to practice dharana. We learn to experience dhyana, a momentum moving forward. And then we begin to experience samadhi. Now, the reason we're aiming to experience samadhi is so that we can eventually know, experience, feel sat, or truth, or that which can't be named. And over on the right here, you see this little egg-like thing that says sat, truth, and the nameless. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but what I've done, hopefully it works out with the PowerPoint, is I've tried to show how experience evolves from eternity, which many people call God or truth or the infinite, that which is always in existence, and how it flows back into the physical, which is what we're experiencing now. So we've got the nameless, the truth, that which is beyond all description. And there's a reason I made this egg white, like the rest of the screen, because there's really no boundary. This is just for the sake of instruction. Once we have this experience of truth, then it comes down to pure spirit. And pure spirit begins to have a sense of feeling separate. This is where we hear Om, where the Om vibration comes into play. Creation starts to happen. However, at this stage, there is still a knowing and experience of the infinite. So there's no problems here whatsoever. Then we have the incomprehensible. This is the level where the mechanics of experience start to come together. As human beings, we cannot comprehend this. It is beyond our capacity to comprehend, but we can experience it. Once this blueprint happens in the incomprehensible, then we start to experience individualization of being separate, a sense of being separate from pure spirit, from the truth. Usually at this stage, we still have an idea of it, but we start to feel as though we are really an individual. Then we have the magnetic. Once we start to have the sense of being an individual, then energies start to take on a power of themselves to create a body, to create a vehicle for experience. And then there's the electrical. That's energy as we can actually really experience it right now. The feeling of heat, the feeling of electricity, the feeling of force, and so on. And we eventually experience the material creation. And everything flows down from truth into this material creation. However, what's fascinating about this, you see, the truth here existed whether or not material, electrical, magnetic, individualization, incomprehensible, or pure spirit existed. It was always there. Pure spirit was able to exist even though the incomprehensible didn't exist, even though individualization didn't exist, even though the magnetic energies didn't exist, even though the electrical didn't exist, and so on. So the material can only exist so long as we have these other layers. But you can take away the material and you'll still have the electrical. You can take away the electrical and you'll still have the magnetic. You can take away individualization, you'll still have incomprehensible, pure spirit, and so on. So what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that what we're aiming to do with our meditation practice is to move more subtle and more subtle and more subtle until we eventually move back into that space of the seer. Because the seer, that which has the capacity to experience, will exist whether or not anything else is there. And we can have lower samadhis, and again, how we label them, I guess it's arbitrary, but we can have a lower samadhi with an experience of Divine Mother. And it's still, even though it's profound, it's immense, it's overwhelming, it is beyond beautiful. We've meditated on Divine Mother so much. We've moved through the stages of Nirvitarka, Savichara, and so on, that we are so absorbed in that oneness with the sense of Divine Mother. But it's still a lower samadhi because it's not pure. It's still focusing on something. But we have to go through that process, because once we can identify with a profound state of consciousness, like our idea of Divine Mother, then we have the ability to say, well, I've done it this far, so why can't I also let go of that and see what is this truth, this eternal existence, which is able to even perceive this, to experience this. And then we're moving into the state of the seer. So when it comes to samadhi, any kind of samadhi we can get that is conscious is great, because any kind of samadhi that we can get that is conscious means we've worked towards it. Not a type of samadhi where you just drink yourself stupid and then there's no thought. We're not talking about going below thought. We're talking about rising above thought. And so anything that you can focus on that gives you the ability to direct your awareness into complete cognitive absorption, that is a skill that will allow you then to also let go of that to flow into higher and higher states. So wherever you are in this process, you want to recognize, what kind of samadhi do I need to cultivate? And right now, it could be as simple as I'm focusing on pranayama and I'm doing alternate nostril breathing. And the kind of samadhi that I have to focus on right now is simply acknowledging that when I do alternate nostril breathing, I say to myself, the breath flows into the left nostril and I feel it. I feel my thumb on the right nostril. The breath flows out of the right nostril and I feel it. So you're using the words to focus so much on alternate nostril breathing that eventually that's all you become aware of is the movement of the breath, the pranayama. And then you might take it into a savichara and nirvichara state, where now you're not focusing on the physical mechanics of it. What you're focusing on is, okay, I feel the energy of the breath coming in through the nostril and filling the body. I feel the energy of the breath flowing out of the right nostril and merging with the environment. And then you move into this subtle state until eventually it builds up so much momentum that all you become aware of is the real reason for pranayama, which is to be absorbed in breath and eventually breathlessness. But you have to go through these stages to get there. And then once you're able to do that with pranayama, then you might want to start choosing a point of focus like Divine Mother or the energy within the chakras. Or even with Kriya Pranayama, you can do it with Kriya Pranayama very well. When we begin practicing Kriya Pranayama, people say, well, I can't feel it. Why can't they feel it? It's not because they didn't get the right guru. It's not because they haven't, found the one and true lineage. It's because they don't have the sensitivity to it. And so with Kriya Pranayama, those of you who know how to do it, as you bring your awareness to the spine and you flow the attention and awareness through the spine, you have to start with the physical. As you breathe in, you just focus on the physical sensation of the spine as though you're scanning your awareness up through the spine, just like we'll go through a little practice right now. So close your eyes, and you don't have to get into a meditation posture, just however you are, close your eyes. And then we're going to scan our awareness from our feet all the way up to the top of our head. So you start by feeling the feet. What do your feet feel like? And then you pull your awareness up to the ankles. And then up to the calves and the lower legs. You feel your knees. Feel your thighs and your hips. Feel your lower abdomen, your belly. Feel your awareness up into your chest and where your arms meet your chest and your neck meets your chest. Flow your awareness down into your arms, your fingers, your elbows. Flow your awareness up into your throat, your brain, and your top of your head, and feel your ears and the tip of your nose. Okay, well, this is an experience of cycling your awareness through the body. Now let's do it with the spine. So bring your awareness down to the base of your spine. Just physically, what does that feel like? Then you can even imagine someone's like running their finger up your spine, and that's bringing more attention there. Bring your awareness up to your tailbone and up to just above your hips. Just feel that area physically. And then up through that little arch in your back, little sway in your back. And up to where your ribs start. And you're feeling your spinal area here. Then you feel the space in between your shoulder blades. And you feel your neck. And then you become aware of the base of your skull. And then you become aware of your brain and the top of your head. And what you've just done is just physically felt that area. So when you first start doing Kriya Pranayama, pulling the current up through the spine, that's all you do. You just link it up with the breath. You feel the breath. You exhale completely. Now, as you inhale, you try to match it with the breath so that as you start to inhale, you're just rolling your awareness physically up through the sensations of your back, in your spine, all the way up, through the shoulder blades, through the neck, through the brain, to the top of the head. And then when you exhale, you let the breath out, and then you follow it back down. You just physically scan the brain, the neck as the breath goes out, between the shoulder blades, down through the lower back, down through the sacrum, down to even the physical feeling of gravity where your butt is. You just feel the center, the core there. And if you do that, that's beginning to train you to have the sensitivity to feel the subtler sensations within the spine. But depending on you, it might take you a few months of doing that every day to build up the momentum to start to turn your awareness within. So when I do Kriya Pranayama, I like to kind of go through the whole process of, say, doing 5 or 6 where I feel the physical, just like we did. And then I'll do 10 or so of imagining or feeling like the energetic aspect of it. And I keep trying to feel more deeply and more deeply into my spine. And it's like I'm exploring a little bit more. You know, I don't know exactly what I'm going to feel, but I'm looking. I'm trying to feel beyond the physical as I go. And the more you're able to do this, eventually you do start to be able to feel the energetic sensation that people say you should feel. But you might have to develop it. You might have to cultivate it. And then what happens, you know, we recently did a podcast with Phil McLemore. It's not going to come out until October, I don't think. But he talked about having a discussion with Mr. Davis about practicing Kriya Pranayama. And Phil had said, you know, I've been doing it so much that now I just close my eyes. He'll tell it better in the podcast, but I just close my eyes and I just feel it rising. I just feel it going up. And Roy said, yeah, that's pretty much what I do now too. Now, why is that? Why is it that in the beginning you really have to get it going? Well, it's because there's no momentum there. But once you've done it for years and decades, you have focused so much cultivating that now you just close your eyes and you feel the area and you just sense, you feel the current rising up through the sushumna. It happens of its own accord. You don't even have to go through the practice of doing Mahamudra or Kriya Pranayama anymore. It becomes natural, all because of momentum. So anyway, the point I'm trying to get across here with this whole talk is that the practice of yoga and experiencing samadhi is not one of someone being special. It's just one of taking the actions which allow it to happen. I was having a discussion with Jasmine the other day. I recently started going to the gym, and I've always gone to the gym, but I started working out with someone who does weight training. And I've done some kinds of weights before, but not like this. And I'm not extremely driven. I'm not trying to get in super good shape. I'm just going to the gym with this person who knows what they're doing a couple times a week. I'm barely even trying. I'm just going and doing it. And it's been 6 months or so, and people have mentioned it to me, and I'm like, wow, that's all I had to do was just do it. I didn't have to want it real bad. I didn't have to try real hard. I didn't have to push myself too hard. I just had to go do it every couple days, and the results happened. The same thing is true, from my experience, with the meditation process. If you just keep doing it and you do it well, the results come. And this is something that if you have been able to cultivate the yamas and niyamas, it will be easier for you. Because one of the things that gets in the way of our practice is wanting it too much. That's why there's santosha, or contentment. Let's say when it came to going to the gym, I was really wanting to, I mentioned I watched the documentary on Arnold Schwarzenegger. I really wanted to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger for some reason, which is crazy. But let's say I did. And I was pushing myself too hard. I would probably hurt myself. I would probably set myself back. I would probably do stupid things, and I wouldn't actually get there. But if you're able to focus on contentment and ask yourself, what are these other tigers I need to fight? And you don't attend to them in a grumpy way, like you're upset that you have to do it. Like, I can't believe I have to waste my time doing this. If you look at it in a way like, oh, well, if I really want to experience this, I need to take care of this preparatory phase first. Then what you're going to see happen is that just by doing the practice that you learn from your spiritual teacher, from your spiritual tradition, it has the effect that they say it does. Just simply by doing it again and again and again, without strain, without stress, just enjoying the process. So this is very important, and this is why you can't let your ego get involved. You can't think, well, this other person is more advanced than me, or this other person says they have those meditative experiences. Don't worry about that. You just go in and you do what works. Again, the fellow that I work out with, he says it's not about, he's a big guy. He says it's not about the weight. He says, are you able to feel it? Meaning, if I was just lifting 5 pounds and I could feel it, he would say that's enough. So if you're able to, within your meditation practice, if you're able to just simply focus on the heart, and you're just spending 30 minutes saying, I feel the shirt around my heart area. I feel the muscles in my back. And you're able to be so pristinely present with it as you go through the exploration of the words and the thoughts and the feelings around this area, and you can stay with it. Eventually, that's going to build up such momentum that you will naturally flow into the next stage, which will be like the nirvitarka, where you're just a pure experience of it, not having to talk about it. But knowledge of these phases can help you understand how to get to a state of samadhi, and to recognize that even when you're talking about something, you are still in a significant state of samadhi because you're not really thinking about or engaged in 20 other things. All right. Now, that's all I have planned for today in regards to my talk, but we've got plenty of time, and I want to open this up to some questions. So if you have questions about what I've discussed, please write it in the chat box, and we will answer as many questions as we can until we get to about 20 minutes from now. So I'm going to take a moment to drink some tea to clear my throat, and I will check back to see what these questions are, and we'll speak to them. And while I'm waiting on questions, I'm going to try to incorporate this idea into every meditation that I lead this weekend. So we do have Pascal leading a meditation, and also Chris Sartain, and they're going to do what they do, and that's fine. It'll work out just perfectly. But as I go through the meditations, I'm going to try to focus on these stages to give you an experience of them. And then when Pascal and Chris do their meditations, follow along with what they are doing, but wonder to yourself, how do these phases apply? Because the more you start thinking in that way, almost any kind of meditation will be able to take on this quality. Okay, so please go over phase 4 again. Okay. So phase 4 is nirvichara. So it goes like this. I have to kind of go through all the phases to explain that fourth phase. There is savitarka. Sa means with. With what? With thought, with imagery, with words, whatever you need. When you're chanting a mantra, you're doing savitarka, because the mantra is directing you to an idea. And then there is nirvitarka, which is without the thoughts and the description, which means whatever you're focusing on, you've taken a moment to let go of the words and the description, the imagery, and you just are observing the experience. You're just letting the focus be there without you talking about it. Again, one way that I like to explain that, it's like when you've listened to a song, and when you listen to a song and the song gets stuck in your head while you're listening to it, and then it continues without you trying. That's like when we're getting into this nirvitarka stage. Then the third stage is sa vichara. Sa vichara. And vichara, while Ramana Maharshi made it popular in the sense of like inquiry, vichara really means like subtle, the subtle field, the subtle experience. And so when you are doing savichara, the third stage, you are focusing on the subtle experience of whatever your awareness is settling on. You're trying to go into a deeper energetic experience of it. And you can talk about it. You can say, well, this energy would feel like this. I could sense this energy moving this way, or the energy would have this kind of quality. So you're still talking about it, but now you're talking about the subtle. Now, nirvichara, the fourth stage, nirvichara, is without the description, which means now you are focusing on the subtle feeling of energy, the deep quality of energy of your meditative state, but you're not talking about it in your head anymore. Again, same thing. It's like listening to a song, and you listen to it so much that now the words just stay in your head. So you focused on the subtle so much, you've talked about it, you've described it to yourself, you've gone over and over it again. And so now you decide to just quit talking about it, quit telling yourself about it, and then just have the actual direct experience of it. So when you get to the nirvichara, it's more of like the momentum has built up, and it's been building up from all of the stages. So each stage is propelling you a little more forward. But now you're focusing more on just the subtle aspect of it, and you're letting that go. And again, with these stages where you let go, you might only be able to do it for a little while, which means you might have to drop back to a previous stage to build up momentum again. So if I was feeling the heart and I was feeling the energy of my heart, and then I got distracted or I couldn't really hold it there anymore, I might drop back to savichara, where I'm talking about. So, okay. So the heart feels like this. This is how the energy moves. This is what I feel the field. And I do that again until the momentum is built up so much that now I can drop the description and just abide, observe, feel. So the subtlety of this process isn't just formulaic, where one leads to the next. It might, but it's also, you have to be adaptable, which means you might get enough momentum to stay at one stage for a little while, but then you have to practice satya, truthfulness, to have the awareness to know, oh, okay, I've lost it. So let's go back to the previous stage and build that momentum up again, right? This is part of the process. Okay, let's see what other questions come up. So if we work on one chakra for a few days, according to the method you have discussed, instead of working on all the chakras together, will that be helpful to increase our sensitivity to the chakras? Yes, I believe that's accurate. Absolutely. I think it's perfectly fine, and I've considered trying to put together a little course on this to help. Absolutely, it's fine to focus on one at a time. I like to be methodical about things. So if I were going to do it, I might start, say, with the heart chakra first and feel that area and do my best to get into that. And then maybe move down to the third chakra, and then maybe move down to the second chakra and the first chakra. I feel like starting at the heart chakra and moving downward will help to keep a more, I guess, spiritual energy to it, because you're starting with the heart rather than getting fixated on the root chakra. But experiment. You definitely need to follow some of the procedures that are recommended, but it's okay from time to time to kind of experiment if you have an idea of what you're up to. Okay, I was always under the impression, unless thought, that meditation was an exercise in passivity. I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it? That does not seem to be the case. As a result, I struggle between intellectualizing meditation and guiding myself through active meditation, if that's correct. Can you please clarify? Yes, this is the problem, and this is why this is why you go on retreats, and you've gone on retreats with these people for 20 years, and no one seems to be enlightened because it's they've made it too passive, and it's not. When you read about Lahiri Mahasaya and his experiences in meditation, it's not because he's just sitting there making himself go into a trance. There's stuff going on in there. So it's like, if we use these phases, you ride both of them. So you start with an active experience where you are focusing on something. But once the momentum is built up, then you are able to let go into what you might be considering to be a more passive state, but it's not passive in the sense of, losing consciousness. It's more like, I would imagine it more like you're riding a bike and you're pedaling, and then you're coasting. So even though you're coasting, you still have to be present because you might have to pedal a little bit or get your balance back. But you do want to do the practice and then ride it. Just like Yogananda had said that with Kriya Pranayama, people who practice Kriya Pranayama but then don't abide in the after effects, it's like preparing a 5-course meal and then just throwing it into the trash. With the Kriya Pranayama, that is the doing, that is the focus, that is the activity of drawing the awareness up through the spine. And then once you've done your allotted number of pranayamas, then the quote passive part would be to ride the momentum of that experience. This idea of passivity, we can spend a lot of time on this, and we've got plenty of time, so we'll see how it goes. The idea of passivity comes because a lot of people in meditation are seeking an escape, or they're tired, or the world is too much for them, and they just want to break. Like that is where this comes from. And why is that the case? Because if you're in difficult situations, if you're in psychologically stressful situations, absolutely you need to rest. But people have taken meditation and made it so that like that is the restful time, but it's not supposed to be. You're not supposed to practice yoga until you are pretty balanced, pretty resilient, which means that as life happens, you don't think, oh God, another misery I have to go through, another difficulty. You become balanced enough that you say, well, here's another challenge. I'm all for it. You look at life, you look at the challenges of life as not as an obstacle that is just another drag. You look at it as like, great, here's something for me to learn and grow from. And it's really hard to have that kind of feeling, that kind of mentality when you've just had the hell beat out of you for years. I remember Roy would say, I forget who he was quoting, but he said, some people, they say, I've been down so long, it seems like up to me. And that's where we have a lot of people have been down so long that meditation is just kind of an escape for them. So what you have to learn to do with your meditation, and that's why the preparation is so important, is to enjoy it, engage the techniques, be active, and then be able to ride the awareness into super consciousness, which is really energizing, not like neurotic or frenetic or anxious energizing. It's like, wow, it's like you really like it, and it's not exhausting, right? So this is what we're aiming to do. That's why you need to be very conscientious of if you're putting yourself in a trance in meditation. If you need to rest, please just go lay down and rest. Just give yourself absolute permission to just let go and to just be quiet and to just lay in bed, like really get it all out there. And use your meditation practice as a way of going into consciousness. And because as you go into it, as you go into spirit, it's really fun. And you don't come out of it saying, geez, I've been meditating for 2 hours, I'm exhausted. You come out of it saying, yeah, I can't wait till tomorrow. So my experience has been that it's actually more of an active thing than we've been sometimes led to believe. All right. Let me read this first. Okay. How should I go forward? I have anxiety and constant thoughts of past or worry that comes up whenever I'm meditating, counseling or focusing on feelings, breathing. I am a big proponent of if this is true for you, and it was true for me. So I'm not telling you this because, I'm up on a high horse and I didn't have to do any of this. This is what made all the difference for me. When I would try to meditate and all I was doing was getting in kind of a peaceful state, but then being assailed by different thoughts or different difficulties or worry or concern or rumination. I realized that there's something in there that I'm not able to really deal with on my own, and I had to get some help. So all my life, I've been perfectly fine finding a counselor. So find someone to talk to, find a good counselor, and recognize that so it's not bad that this is happening, because whatever's coming up in meditation is just cluing you in on what you probably need to go talk to someone about. And what you'll find is it's a really fun process, because once you work it out, and it could take a little while, but once you work it out, then you sit down and meditate, and you do feel that freedom, that energy, that upliftment, because you're not dealing with all the worry and the thoughts that you're describing. So my first step that I went through is, yes, I did pranayama, I did breathing to help regulate those things. But what I found is that when I just did that on my own, that was simply helping me to cope. It wasn't helping me to resolve it. So I would do whatever I needed to do to cope in that moment. So yes, when you're meditating, if you want to do some deeper breathing to kind of help you get through it so that you can actually meditate well, that's fine. But in order to really be able to access those more profound states of consciousness, do some research, find a counselor, and you might have to try one or two because they're not all that great. You got to find a good one, just like anything else. And then when you meditate, write down the things that come up for you and bring those to your counselor and say, this is what I need to work on. So it's not a setback. It's not a bad thing. It's actually very good if someone would actually act on it, because then you'll make great progress in meditation rather than trying to spend 20 years meditating out all by yourself. If you don't have my book, Kriya Yoga, An Essential Guide to Kriya Yoga Practice. Yeah, An Essential Guide to Kriya Yoga Practice. I talk about this a good bit in the very beginning. So get that book and read through there. That might be helpful for you. Right, regarding Sushumna breathing, hard to feel lower chakras, much easier to feel the energy as it goes upward to higher chakras. Why? Is it related to emotional issues needing to be worked out? It depends on the person. It could be, yes, because a lot of us have trauma, physical, sexual, mental, emotional, and whether we have it or not, we've known someone who's had it. And a lot of that is related to the lower chakras. And oftentimes we don't want to feel those things, and for good reasons. And so on one level, it could absolutely be there, you don't have sensitivity there because there's a part of the experience that you don't really want to have. That's possible. Or it could also be that you've done enough inner work that that's just not really a thing for you anymore. Like it just doesn't really, you don't really need to focus. You want to feel more up here. It's just a natural thing. My experience has been it's good if it's possible to feel, like the root chakra for the earth element and the second chakra for the water element. And sometimes one of the ways you can work on that is by just focusing on the element itself, focusing, meditating on stability, the bones, the structure, like rocks, like really stable things. Or with the water element, meditating on fluidity, buoyancy, a feeling of water. So the reason it might be the case for you, I'm not sure. But if you know that you've got some difficulties with lower chakra issues, that might be something to explore again with a professional. All right, with longer time of practice, are you able to go? Okay, with longer time of practice, are you able to go over relatively soon into Nirvichara Samadhi? Sure, we'll do that. Let's see. I think you're located, 6 hours away, something like that? We'll do it. Let me look at we will do it tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, I'll focus on a practice that'll give that experience. All right, long question here. Let me read it. This is great. When interacting with people, and especially family, how can I avoid becoming that annoying guy who always wants to talk about yoga and the importance of correct behavior when everyone else doesn't care and just wants to do their thing? It's tough because I'm learning so much and want to discuss it. Most people here just like to drink their beer and be done with it, and they seem happy. So I suppose it's me that's the problem. Is there a way to throw these ideas without becoming a bother? I don't know, because I think I was just a bother. For the first 7 years that I was involved in Kriya Yoga, I was that guy that was sitting around trying to tell people about Ayurveda and meditation and what's wrong and why they need to get over that and this and the other. And after about 7 years, when I decided to stop doing that, my friends all thanked me because they were tired of it. So that's what I did. And then I spent a number of years just not interacting with anyone because I figured, well, they don't care. And that's all I want to talk about. So I spent a lot of time alone. And then, let's see, that would have been 14 years. So then after about 14 years, I just decided that what was most important was just being with people. Meaning it didn't really matter if they cared about yoga. It didn't really matter if they were interested in the things I was interested in. I would just go be with them. And so I think it's normal to have that experience, but in the long run, hopefully you can benefit from my experience here and try to figure out why you just can't be with people and recognize why, or recognize that this path is just for you. I don't know why that is the case for you. I know for me, it was because I wanted to feel like I belonged. And the way I wanted to feel like I belonged was by trying to find people who actually cared about this stuff. But even now, I mean, I'll be honest with you, half the people that tell me they care about this stuff, when I actually talk to them, I don't really get the sense that they really care about this stuff. I get the sense that they just want to talk about it. They don't really want to do it. And so even then, even when I'm around people who know the word santosha and vichara and vairagya, I still don't bring it up. I ask them about their family. If they like to play games, I talk to them about games. Or if they like music, I talk to them about music. So, and if they want to drink beer, let them enjoy their beer. There's nothing wrong with that. How can you have love and appreciation for people just for who they are? I think by cultivating that is good, because then if they actually do want to learn what you're interested in, one day they'll ask you. My stepdaughter, she thinks that I'm kind of in a cult, and not in a judgmental way, but she said she's not really interested in it because it seems too religious, because she sees me get up every morning and meditate for a long period. She sees how I'm like very consistent in what I do, as though I'm very religious about it. And however, even though I don't talk to her about that much, she'll every now and then bring up conversations where we talk about the yugas and the cosmic cycles, and she'll tell me things that have a relationship to yoga, and I will explain that to her, but I don't push it on her. So I don't have a real easy answer for that, other than I would say, this is what I would say to anybody, because I see a lot of people who start learning this. They'll come to a retreat or they'll participate in something like this, and next thing I know, I'm on Facebook and they become friends of mine, and now every single post is about yoga, or every single post is about this philosopher and that philosopher. And I don't know if you've ever seen my posts, but they're not about those things. And I want to say to them, knock it off. Like, stop just trying to like portray this and really get into it yourself. Like, stop it. Just live a normal life, an unassuming life, and make it so much about who you are that you don't have to make these fantastic posts all the time. People are around you and they have an experience of peace. That is the most transformational thing. Hopefully people have that with me. I don't know, but at least that's my goal. So consider that and see if there's a way for you to work with that. It's a great question and a really valid one. Okay, so when you move beyond thoughts, words, and descriptions, what kind of questions assist exploring the subtle aspect? You have to pick something that you're focusing on. So for example, I talked about Divine Mother, or you can talk about the elements. And like, if you go through a process of meditating on the elements, you go through like the physical, specifically like earth, and then you go through water, and then fire, and then air, and then ether. And in that experience, you are actually moving subtler and subtler and subtler, which is why I like chanting through the chakras, because the chakras are focused on the elements. And just by focusing on them, you will naturally go through this experience as you get to the higher chakras and above. But once you say get to the throat chakra and the ether element, well, then the sound of ether or the indicator of ether is sound. So that's when you start meditating on the Om vibration. So from my experience, what I like to recommend is, and this will happen no matter what you are doing, again, from my experience, that once you get to such a subtle area and you're still awake, you're not nodding off, you're not getting passive, you're like there, but you're internalized, you will start to hear an inner frequency like the Om, or you will start to see an inner light in your spiritual eye. And then once you get there, then you start focusing on that. That's a little later on down the line. So I'm just trying to get people into this process. But if you are able to get so subtle that then you hear a sound like the Om vibration, where you see an inner light, then you meditate on that. Then you direct all your awareness to that. And most of the time, that'll take care of itself if you can hold your awareness there. Great question. Let's see. What was discussed with the 4 stages of Samadhi? So Vitarka and Vichara, the first 2. What about Ananda and Asmita, the last 2? Okay, so the stages that we're going through Samadhi for today to get people in the process, again, are Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara. There are things beyond that, like Anvaya, Artavatva, and so on. But if you get these 4 first, you're going to be doing very well. Okay, so this is a comment about Ramana Maharshi in the back there. Now, many people think that Ramana Maharshi wasn't an advocate of yoga because he would say just focus on the self. Well, the whole purpose of yoga is to give you a step-by-step procedure to do that. So with Ramana Maharshi, if he could look at you and he could say, just be the self, and you were able to say, oh yeah, sure. And then you're the self, great, you got it. But if Ramana Maharshi were to look at you and say, just be the self, and you go, okay, what do you mean again? Well, if that's you, which it was like me and like most people, you activate these steps of the yoga of Patanjali, and then you get that. So by learning to access the state of Samadhi as indicated through these 8 limbs of yoga through Patanjali, and then you have the experience, then when you're around Ramana Maharshi and he says, be the self, you say, I got it, buddy. And you're there. And that's what we're aiming to do. So Ramana Maharshi himself might not necessarily have had to have gone through the exact procedures, but those of us who don't need to go through those of us who need to go through the exact procedures, that is why yoga is here. And this is why I like teaching it, because it's repeatable. Meaning Ramana Maharshi says, just be the self. That's not super repeatable unless you are really close to already having an understanding of what he's talking about. But the formula of Patanjali makes it repeatable, which is really wonderful. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions here. Okay, so we'll do one more question here, and then we'll conclude. So this final question that we have, can you speak about coping with transitioning from a more tamasic lifestyle towards a more sattvic lifestyle as we practice these principles? On my journey, I'm no longer interested in rajasic, tamasic things or experiences. this is a bit at odds with Western active-driven materialistic lifestyle and relationships. Well, you turn into someone like me whose friends say things like, you're eating dinner at 4 p.m. and you're in bed by 8? What is this, like the senior citizens, home or something like that? So they make jokes to me about that. But Roy did the same thing. I remember he would talk about being in bed by 7:30 at night. And I remember when I would meet with him at CSA, they would eat lunch around 11 o'clock. And I think he would eat dinner sometime around 4 or so. And then do what he needs to do, go to bed, wake up at 3 and keep going. So how to cope with it, I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask about that, because my way of coping with it was just when people said, do you want to go out? I would say no. Or when people would say, do you want to do this? I'd say, sorry, I'm asleep. Or when people would text me at 9 o'clock and I turned my phone off because I'm already, meditating or going to sleep, I would tell them, well, you got to message me before this period of time. So I don't have a real useful plan for that, other than you just need to arrange your life in such a way that you are doing what you are comfortable with, which is supportive of you, and then have the ability to just not confrontationally, but just tell people, this is what I do. And if they question you about it, you don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to make up excuses. You just say, this is how I live my life, and let it go. And that is a really useful, important thing, because early on, when I first got involved in this whole situation, the Kriya Yoga and meditation, I was very fanatic, and I tried to mimic Roy's lifestyle, going to bed early, not socializing, all these types of things. But then I found that I needed a little more socialization, because I guess I am kind of a social person, according to some people. And I would engage in still playing music with a band and so on, because I liked that. I needed that. But as time went on, I just lost my interest in some of those things. They just faded away. And what became more interesting for me was actually, I talk about the experiences that you have when you really get into meditation, how it's enjoyable. Well, I schedule my time around that. Like I want to be home in the evening so I can just take a shower and go really get into this process. And fortunately, my partner Jasmine is great, because I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to say, this is why I'm going to bed early. Like, because she's also kind of what's the word? A little more withdrawn, I suppose. She prefers to be alone. And so my life is more built around that. And because it's enjoyable to me, I don't mind the other things I'm missing out on. So I guess, or that I'm supposedly missing out on. So I guess the thing that you have to learn to ride, which might take a little while, is you might still miss out on some of that, the Rajasic or the more westernized approach to things. And that doesn't mean you have to deny it. If you still want to go out for drinks every now and then with someone, or if you still want to have a little bit late dinner or go to a party or something, it's okay. Let yourself do it, because if it's still like a real strong drive in there, give yourself permission to enjoy that. But you don't want it to overtake you. You want to be very conscientious about what you're doing. You want to say, I am going to go do this, but only because I need it a little bit. You're not thinking, I can't wait to do this tomorrow night, next month, and so on. You're learning to kind of give yourself, throw the dog a bone, as they say, give yourself a little bit, but then recognize what you're working towards is, in a sense, kind of letting go from those things, and that's really okay in the long run. So you have to let yourself get it out. You have to let yourself, from my experience, actually get it out of your system, because if you don't get it out of your system and you're just trying to hold it down and say, I really don't want to go see people. If you're trying to kind of force it, that'll backfire on you. So recognize that you're moving in a direction that you might be a little more internalized. You might be a little less interested in going to the next Taylor Swift concert and so on. But every now and then, if you want to go, you let yourself go, and you don't do it in a sheepish way. You thoroughly enjoy it. You give yourself permission to really, yeah, I'm going to have a good time here. And if you do it from that kind of conscientious or conscious way, you will naturally kind of flow into what you might consider to be a more sattvic lifestyle, and you'll appreciate it, and you won't have sort of residual drives that are going to make you, act out every now and then. All right, final question, then we're done. So no more questions in the chat box. I have difficulty feeling the physical aspects of areas of the chakras. I can feel a temperature and other things, as my knowledge of anatomy is not good. How can I improve that? Well, like I said, I mentioned with the spiritual eye, like feel it, like push around there, and then just notice the sensation. This is the other reason that like hatha yoga is so important, because when you're doing certain bends and postures and stretches, you have to actively feel those areas. So if you can't feel, say, the first chakra or the second chakra, what can you do? You can do some deep breathing that like activates the belly in that area. Or before you do meditation, you can talk to a hatha yoga teacher and figure out some stretches that will activate those muscles within the area. Or you can get an anatomy book and look at the anatomy book and just imagine, okay, well, that's where the bladder is. And that's kind of like just around the second chakra area. So if I could feel that little bladder and then like little tubes that come off of it, what would that feel like? So you can do it very practically by like physically touching the area. I know one teacher, when it comes to getting to the throat chakra, they actually massage the back of the neck and massage the top of the head, or put their hand on the heart and massage it, or even take the tips of your fingers and push on your belly button a little bit, not to hurt yourself, just to bring your awareness there. So do whatever it takes to physically start to bring your attention to those areas. And again, with asana, if we've done some kind of physical practice, we tend to have more body awareness. Even as I mentioned, like with weightlifting, that has given me so much more body awareness in areas that I didn't have, because I have to be conscious of the muscle that I'm using. And what I thought was brilliant about meeting this guy who's been teaching me is he said, the very first day I started to work out with him, this is what he said. He said, when you are lifting a weight, he said, don't just be mindless about it. He said, take those earbuds out, like be present. He said, when you're lifting something or pushing something, he said, feel the muscle that's being activated and imagine that you're breathing through it. And that made me laugh out loud, because part of the energization exercises that Yogananda teaches is all about like feeling a particular part of the body and directing your awareness there by feeling the breath moving through it. And as soon as he said that, whether he's not a yogi by any stretch of, he's the opposite of a yogi in some ways. But as soon as I heard him say that, I knew that this is a good guy to learn from, because even though he didn't know what I knew about like the energization exercises, he had some kind of subtle knowledge that would help me with my body awareness as well. So the long and short of it is, whatever you need to do, like when I feel the root chakra, I'll just like tense and relax the perineum just a few times, just to, okay, well, there's the root chakra. And when I feel the second chakra, if I need to kind of like wiggle around a little bit to kind of feel the movement of the spine in that area, I'll do that. Or if I'm feeling the third chakra, I might pull my belly in and out a little bit just to get that sensation. Or if I'm sitting in a chair, I'll just kind of rub my back a little bit against the chair, because where my back is hitting, it's probably around where the third chakra is. So avail yourself of any way you can to develop greater sensitivity. And the greater your sensitivity, if you have resilience, if you're healthy-minded, if you're able to deal with these things well, you can ride that sensitivity more fully and fully inward. And then what you'll do is just like on that diagram, where you'll be able to withdraw from the material experience. You'll be able to withdraw from the electrical, the magnetic, clear up until all you're aware of is these higher states of consciousness. And that is really what we're aiming to do with this whole process. And it can be done. It's absolutely accessible to you. You just have to be very meticulous about it. You have to really pay attention to the little components there, and not be frustrated Learn to attend to them step by step, like you're building something that's really meaningful to you. Think about if you were building a house for your child, and you knew how to build a house, and you had all the money in the world and all the time in the world. You would really take your time to focus on the very specific each aspect of that house. So when this child moved in, it would be a quality home, something that they could live in and feel comfortable in, and keep them happy and healthy and safe. You would spend the time to go through each little step. You wouldn't skip steps. You wouldn't try to cut costs or anything. You would spend the time. Well, this is what we need to do with our yoga practice if we really want to understand what Lahiri and Mahasaya understood, Yogananda and so on. They took the time. So you have to take the time. And if you do, you've got the support. You've got people like myself trying to share the knowledge with you of how to do it. There are books available to you. If you take the time and be patient, you'll get there. And that's why you're here. That's the whole purpose of all this. That's why Yogananda talked about that the mission given to humans was to rise above the confusion of Maya, to get to the truth of it all. And it's not meant to be a drag. It's not meant to be torture. It's actually really enjoyable if you give yourself permission to spend time with it. Anyway, well, thank you all for being here for our talk today. We went a little longer than I expected, but I appreciate your attendance. Next up, we will have Pascal Chambers. She is a Kriya Yoga teacher in the lineage of Roy Jean Davis and Paramahansa Yogananda, just like I think all of us. She's a wonderful speaker. I believe she's working on a new podcast, Modern Yoga. You can go to modernyoga.podbean.com. She's been teaching meditation yoga for about 17 years. Again, we'll talk more about her when she shows up here at 2 p.m. today. But she'll be speaking on self-mastery on the Kriya Yoga path. So I'll be here with you, and I look forward to coming together again for Pascal's talk at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And then we'll meet up again at 6 p.m. for a 45-minute meditation together for our Friday. All right, so be well. It was wonderful seeing you, and we'll be in touch soon.